Most people think financial problems come from obvious bad decisions, but that's usually not how it happens. This is Ava, busy life, long days, always trying to make things easier. And then there's Daniel, same income, same general responsibilities, same kind of life. But somehow, money doesn't seem to disappear as quickly for him. Things feel less tight. And the difference between them starts much smaller than most people realize, because convenience rarely feels expensive in the moment. It feels helpful, efficient, like removing stress from your day. After work, Ava orders food because she's exhausted. Daniel sometimes does too, but not every time. Sometimes the delivery total makes him pause, and that tiny difference seems meaningless. Until it isn't, because convenience doesn't usually change spending emotionally, it changes it mechanically. Food arrives faster, checkout takes seconds, subscriptions stay invisible, payments happen quietly, and over time, those tiny moments start changing how spending feels. Because the less friction something has, the less awareness it requires, and the less awareness something requires, the easier it becomes to repeat. That's what makes this hard to notice. Because from the outside, Ava doesn't look irresponsible. She works hard, pays her bills, handles her responsibilities. She's not constantly shopping. She's not making reckless decisions. Daniel doesn't look extreme either. He's not obsessively budgeting. He still spends money, still pays for convenience, but something in their routines feels different. Ava's life becomes smoother. Daniel's still contains pauses, and those pauses matter more than people think, because after a long day, decision-making feels exhausting. Ava opens a delivery app. It feels easier than cooking, not because she can't cook, not because she's lazy, because mental energy is limited. Daniel feels that same exhaustion too, but sometimes he still chooses the annoying option, something simple at home, because friction is still there long enough to influence the decision, and convenience steps into that exhaustion quietly. That's what makes it powerful, because convenience rarely presents itself as indulgence. It presents itself as relief, a faster option, a simpler option, a way to remove one more difficult thing from your day. Tap to pay feels easier than thinking about totals. Ava taps and moves on. Daniel sometimes glances first. Monthly subscriptions feel easier than canceling them. Auto renewals feel easier than remembering passwords. And individually, none of those moments feel important enough to question. Because modern spending rarely feels serious while it's happening. It feels normal, small, convenient. And convenience changes behavior quietly, through repetition. Because every time something becomes easier to buy, it becomes easier to repeat. And eventually, spending stops feeling like a decision. Convenience stops feeling optional. Cooking feels exhausting. Waiting feels uncomfortable. And this is where Ava and Daniel start separating. Because once convenience becomes the default, anything slower starts feeling wrong. Ava feels that shift faster. Daniel lives in the same world, but not every part of his life is frictionless, and that difference matters. Because friction used to slow people down. Not perfectly, but enough to create awareness. Purchases took effort. You had time to reconsider. Now, one click, one tap, one swipe, and suddenly, money is gone before your brain fully processes the decision. Not because people became irresponsible, because the environment changed. And that's really the difference between Ava and Daniel. Not intelligence, not discipline, environment. Daniel's life still contains friction, small pauses, moments where spending slows down long enough to be noticed. Sometimes he leaves something in his cart overnight. Sometimes he waits before replacing something that still works. And while those moments seem insignificant, they quietly create different patterns. Because individually, they barely look like financial decisions at all. But over time, they shape different outcomes. And once you see that, the conversation gets bigger than Ava and Daniel. Because this isn't really about them. It's about what happens when modern life removes friction faster than awareness can adapt. Because convenience doesn't just change spending, it changes the speed of decisions. And once decisions move fast enough, awareness starts disappearing. That's when spending becomes hard to track emotionally. Not mathematically, emotionally. Because people stop fully feeling purchases while they happen. A $14 delivery fee doesn't feel serious. A $9.99 subscription doesn't feel serious. A small monthly payment doesn't feel serious. Because spending rarely arrives as one painful event. It arrives as fragments, small charges, quiet renewals, tiny upgrades, things that barely interrupt the day, and individually, they feel forgettable. But financially, they accumulate the same way. That's what modern systems understand. Monthly instead of yearly, four payments instead of one total, installments instead of totals, instant approval instead of waiting, free trials that quietly become recurring charges later. Everything becomes optimized to reduce hesitation. And hesitation used to protect people more than they realized. Because even tiny pauses change behavior. A few seconds to think, a moment to reconsider, a little friction between wanting something and buying it. Without those pauses, spending blends into routine life. That's when people start feeling financially confused. Because from the outside, they're doing everything normally, working, paying bills, trying to stay afloat, and somehow, money still disappears faster than expected, progress still feels temporary, and eventually, people start blaming themselves. More discipline, more self-control, a stricter budget, but often, the problem started earlier, when convenience became the default environment around them. Because environments shape behavior quietly, modern systems are optimized for speed, not awareness, not reflection. And over time, awareness itself starts feeling exhausting. Checking subscriptions feels annoying, budgeting feels restrictive, cooking feels harder than delivery, canceling something feels like a task for later, and little by little, the easier behavior starts winning automatically. That matters. Because most people aren't actively choosing financial drift. They're adapting, quietly, repeatedly, to environments built to reward convenience. And once you see that, awareness stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like protection. You start noticing how powerful small pauses really are, how often convenience makes decisions before you fully realize it. And no, convenience itself isn't evil. That's not the point. The point is what happens when life becomes optimized to make spending effortless, while awareness still requires energy. Because eventually, the easiest behaviors become the default ones. And defaults shape direction more than intentions do. Because most people don't wake up and decide to drift financially. They just keep repeating what feels easiest, what feels fastest, what feels normal. And that's what makes this so difficult to notice. Because nothing about it feels dramatic. Nothing feels reckless. Nothing feels like a major mistake. It just feels like life getting easier. Until one day, you realize easier hasn't actually been moving you forward, and that's the real shift. Because getting ahead financially isn't always about becoming stricter, or more disciplined, or harder on yourself. Sometimes, it starts by noticing what your environment keeps making effortless, and deciding whether that direction is actually helping you. Because convenience changes people financially, not through one big decision, but through the small ones that stop feeling like decisions at all.